Hey everybody, I'm Christina Aguilera, and I am here in my hometown of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to talk about sex and politics. Now, I've never been one to be shy about my own views or beliefs, but in this election year, it's your views that count.
I don't think it's realistic to assume that anyone will wait until marriage.
I am opposed to abortion,
Just as I am opposed to murder.
It's your body the White House is dealing with when it comes to sex education,
Sex is great!
abortion, and domestic violence.
There's some people out there that'll kill a pregnant person.
And the only say you get is your vote. This is what a lot of people think of when they think of sex. But what about this? You might not know it, but your sex life is tied up with the people in power.
$500 million of your tax dollars have already been spent telling teens that sex before marriage is bad, with condoms and contraception left out of the lesson. What kind of sex ed belongs in public school? Listen and decide.
The silver ring thing is on the move, and they're bringing abstinence to America. These teens and 20-somethings have all pledged to hold off on getting it on until marriage. And they've got silver rings and hip-hop rhymes to prove it.
Come and try on this silver ring thing and say I'm saving myself. I'm saving myself. Lock and key, you won't get it off of me. Yeah.
They crossed the country with a high-tech roadshow featuring pro-virginity music, skits, and videos. Members like Jason believe that, just like the silver ring thing, public school sex ed classes should be teaching abstinence and nothing more.
Whatever's being taught and the values that have been instilled isn't working. So we need to start doing differently.
It's no secret that sex can be risky. Every year, 1 in 4 sexually active teens gets a sexually transmitted disease. And more than 1 in 3 young women gets pregnant before age 20, almost always by accident. Many abstinence advocates want schools to teach kids that premarital sex is always unsafe.
We don't teach safety in carrying weapons. We don't teach safety in drinking and driving. We tell them, don't do it. Here's why.
Of course, those activities are illegal, but the silver ring thing says all kids should view sex the same way.
No sex until you're married, and no fooling around.
So what does that mean for your dating life?
What really is ruled out? You guys are a couple, so maybe you two can speak about that.
We'll kiss, we'll hang out, we'll hold hands, we'll hug and stuff. But we don't want to let it go any further than that.
Touchy-feely over clothes, then is one step closer.
Yes, definitely.
Dry humping.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's fine. Like, I mean, you start doing that, then all of a sudden it's real easy to, well, maybe you can take off your shirt, well, maybe you can do this, maybe you can do that. And we don't want to take it there at all.
But will this work in a country where 80% of the population has sex before marriage and over 60% do it before high school graduation?
It's unrealistic to say kids are not having sex, and if you say no, they won't have sex. It is absolutely, fundamentally necessary to give kids information about contraception and about protection.
Nicole wishes she'd been given a little more information before her first time.
Do you remember having sex ed in school? A little bit. It was basically focused on abstinence, though. We didn't really talk in depth about making choices or contraception, things like that.
At 15, Nicole started dating her first boyfriend. He was 2 years older and more sexually experienced, and he began pressuring Nicole to have sex even though she wasn't ready.
He said things, like we loved each other, and so that would make it a positive experience, would bring us closer.
Sex talk was taboo at home, and she didn't feel comfortable talking with teachers or friends. So Nicole's only source of information was her boyfriend.
He said, we didn't even need to use a condom, and that I would be fine, and also that it felt better for him if we didn't use a condom.
Of course.
Right.
Every guy will say.
Yeah.
It turns out Nicole's boyfriend was wrong. Just a few months after losing her virginity, Nicole got pregnant.
I was 1 month turned 16 when I had sex for the first time, and 1 month turned 17 when I gave birth. I just thought, this is not the life that I want. I wanted to go to college, and I wanted to have a career and do all those things that I wouldn't be able to do with a baby.
Nicole decided to have the child and give him up for adoption, which meant through junior year, her closest companion was the baby she was carrying.
I would talk to him sometimes and say, I'm really sorry about this whole situation. I'm trying to take care of myself, and I'm trying to do his best. And, That's very cool. That's very strong. Yeah, I was alone.
Many experts believe kids like Nicole need classroom instruction that covers all the issues tied to sexual health.
It encompasses not just reproductive health, but, communication skills, relationship building, self-esteem enhancement.
But abstinence advocates say teaching contraception sends a mixed message.
They're saying, on one hand, we don't want you to have sex, but if you do, then make sure you're safe. But that kind of message also says that we don't really expect you to be able to reach this goal.
President Bush wants all kids to reach that goal. He's called for spending $268 million this year on school programs that promote virginity but never mention condoms. John Kerry, the Democratic presidential challenger, says it's not enough to tell kids premarital sex is bad. He supports programs known as Abstinence Plus, which include information about contraception. If you ask the researchers, most of them will tell you that while abstinence pledgers do delay having sex by 18 months, they're just as likely as non-pledgers to get STDs and less likely to use protection when they do have sex. And while it's proven that proper use of a latex condom gives you 10,000 times more protection against HIV than unprotected sex, many schools that teach abstinence only still use materials that tell kids things like, relying on condoms is like playing Russian roulette. Critics say these programs discourage condom use among kids who do have sex, and that such education policies are based on religion and politics, not science.
What would you say, Jason? Would you be okay with premarital sex if there was zero risk of STD and zero risk of pregnancy?
I don't believe so, no, because the reason why I believe what I believe is because I do have a faith. I do have faith in God, and I believe that God created marriage, and I believe that marriage is something...
And it says this in the Bible.
Yeah, and that's how it was created to be that way.
Is sex only for the purpose of making babies, to you?
No, definitely not.
No, I think, one of our segments in our show, it talks about how sex is an awesome thing.
Sex is great! Oh, and it is great in the context of marriage.
Do you believe that there's a possibility that you could have a bad sex life? I mean, could the sex be bad because it's something you've never tried, or? According to the partner?
If you see a donut and it looks good, I'm pretty sure it's going to be good.
Oh, really? Because I've had some rotten ones. You never know. Got to test drive the car before you buy it, right?
I give the members of the Silver Ring thing props. There's no denying that staying sex-free is the only surefire way to avoid some serious consequences. And avoiding temptation isn't easy. If you agree with them, you'll probably line up with President Bush on this issue. But John Kerry and other supporters of comprehensive sex ed have a point too. They believe abstinence-only education doesn't offer answers to people like mature couples who decide they're ready for sex but not marriage, and gay people who can't get married in most states even if they want to, and people like Nicole.
Is there anything that you wish you could have learned through school that might have helped prevent you from getting pregnant in the first place?
I really wish that somebody would have had an honest conversation and say, you need to use a condom, and that if you're going to engage in sex, what that will entail and what you need to be prepared for, as well as saying it's better to wait.
When we come back, what happens when you do have sex and don't use protection?
I knew. I just knew. And I said, I'm pregnant. I know I am.
Earlier, I learned how much education can influence our choices about sex. On my next stop, I met two women who told me about their choices when unprotected sex led to accidental pregnancy. Abortion has always been one of the most divisive issues in American politics.
I have every right to go in this clinic.
It's also one of the hardest decisions a woman may ever have to make.
I dated one guy through high school. He was older than me. I wanted to get married and have kids, and I just wasn't ready for that. I needed somebody my own age. So I met this guy, and we were sexually active.
Were you taught to use any kind of protection?
We use condoms 98% of the time.
But it's that other 2% that'll get you. Melissa, now a medical technician, was just 17 when she discovered she'd gotten a lot more than she bargained for from her senior fling.
I knew. I just knew. I missed my period the first day, and I said, I'm pregnant. I know I am.
So you're 17 years old. You find out you're pregnant. What are you feeling?
I was scared to death. How would I ever provide for a child? How could I ever make a happy home for a child?
So walk me through a day in the life of Rebecca around the time you found out that you had gotten pregnant?
Well, I lived in a house with a bunch of roommates. Basically, we just, partied all day.
But the party stopped when 20-year-old Rebecca found out she was pregnant.
It was the day before Christmas Eve, and
oh, wow. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, really. So I took a pregnancy test, and my first thought was that it was wrong because I was really drunk.
Were you scared?
There was no way that I wanted to have a baby.
Today, a woman facing an unplanned pregnancy has 3 options: keep the baby, give it up for adoption, or have an abortion. 1.3 million women each year choose to have abortions, and 56% of them are in their 20s. But until 30 years ago, American women didn't have that option. Abortion was illegal in most states until the Supreme Court legalized it in the landmark 1973 case, Roe v. Wade. But the debate didn't end there.
I don't believe that abortion should be legal. I believe that no woman should be given the choice between the life and death of her child.
Abortion rights supporters say the government shouldn't be deciding whether or not women give birth, and that criminalizing abortion will be deadly to women.
In countries where abortions are not legal, thousands upon thousands of women die every year because they get unsafe, illegal abortions.
Today, the debate is as heated as ever. President Bush is strongly opposed to abortion.
My administration is working to build a culture of life.
John Kerry just as strongly supports a woman's right to make her own reproductive choices, including abortion.
I trust women to make their own decisions, and you don't, Mr. President.
And that's not just political rhetoric. In the last year, President Bush has pushed through 2 controversial laws, including the most significant restriction on abortion since 1973, banning a rare late-term procedure some call partial birth abortion. The second law is the Unborn Victims of Violence Act, which makes injuring a fetus a separate crime from injuring the mother.
All these different pieces of legislation, including the partial birth abortion ban, are basically a means to one end, and that is to restrict a woman's right to choose.
The key is the Supreme Court. While a narrow majority of the current court sees abortion as a constitutional right, a slightly different court could make it a crime. And with 4 justices over 70 and retirements possible, the balance could shift at any time. So it all comes down to you. You vote for the president nominates Supreme Court justices, and they could decide whether or not abortion remains legal.
Did you know from the beginning that you wanted to keep the baby? You just knew?
I knew from the beginning of time that I was going to keep my child. I'd rather be up with the child at night crying than myself crying knowing that I killed my child.
Is this because of religion?
I feel that a baby, even though it's so tiny and small, it has a purpose in this life. You might not know what the purpose is, but God has a purpose for them.
And Rebecca decided her life had a different purpose.
Originally, I thought about carrying the pregnancy to term and giving the baby up for adoption, but both of my parents thought that getting an abortion was the best option for me. I was 20, and I wanted to go back to school, and I knew that at that point in my life, I was not ready to raise a child.
How do you think religion influences this debate?
A lot of people who are fairly religious think it's more important to think about a fetus and its rights rather than a living, breathing human being.
Now the mom of 6-year-old Jordan, Melissa's life has changed completely. Her boyfriend bailed on his promise to help her, so until her recent remarriage, Melissa faced life as a single mom.
He was about 3 months old, and I started school, and I worked full-time, and I had this little baby at home. I'd be up in the middle of the night with either a crying baby or doing homework. It was not easy.
A social life?
My social life was being at work.
Like Melissa, Rebecca and her boyfriend eventually broke up. But did she ever regret her decision?
I didn't really think about it after that. The only time I really felt a little bit of regret was on my due date when I would have had the baby.
Yeah.
But not enough that it would make me go back and change things.
Did you ever wonder what life might have been if you had gone with another choice?
I don't think I would have as much enjoyment in my life. My son is the world to me, and he's awesome.
I would probably have had to move back in with my parents. I wouldn't have been able to work full time. I wouldn't have been able to just have the freedom to come and go as I please.
Would you vote for a candidate that is pro-choice?
No, because I feel that all children need a chance.
Would you ever vote for someone that was anti-abortion?
Never.
Never. So what would you say to young people out there who might say that government doesn't affect their lives?
You never really know what's going to happen, and you may be faced with a decision that you didn't think you would be faced with. And not voting is the same as voting for someone who wants to strip you of your rights.
I know that domestic violence can happen in any family, because it happened in mine. Yet it's still shocking that 1 out of every 5 teenage girls has been physically hurt by someone they were dating. Meet Lamar.
Who has big eyes, big wide eyes?
He and his mom, Shaquaya, are safe today thanks to the Women's Center and Shelter of Greater Pittsburgh. Shaquaya grew up in a rough neighborhood here, and at age 17 she fell in love with the one boy she trusted.
He was like shy around girls and stuff.
Right, right.
So I kind of thought, well, maybe he might be different because, he's not all like, other guys are,
Was there any sign that he could possibly be physically abusive?
No.
After living together for 6 months, Shaquaya says she and her boyfriend began arguing constantly over a car they shared. One day, she got fed up and just took the car out.
He arrived home later on that day. Very angry with me and everything. So, I hid the keys to the car and I hit the car. Then he got really angry with me and just started biting me, tying me up with sheets and stuff. Just so, I wasn't going nowhere or nothing like that.
Where did he bite you?
On my shoulders, on my arms and stuff.
Sadly, attacks on women as young as Shaquaya happen all the time.
Last year, statistically, the age group of 16 through 24 was the primary age group that reported dating and domestic violence.
After the assault, Shaquaya stayed away from her boyfriend for a few months. Eventually, she returned home, but she says it didn't take long for the pattern to repeat itself.
Everything was good for a couple months until I was 8 months pregnant. They just got mad or whatever. Just threw me outside the house.
Shaquaya is far from alone. Domestic violence affects people of every race and every religion, and it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. But unless you've lived with abuse, it's difficult to understand how hard it is to break free.
You keep convincing yourself, well, he's going to change because you see that he's hurting me.
Right, absolutely. Or you end up feeling bad for him because you see he's trying. He says he's trying.
Right.
And it's so easy for people to say, well, why don't you just leave? Why don't you just leave? But they don't understand there's emotional abuse there. There's psychological abuse that's going on, which I know about coming from, my own domestic, abusive past. So, I know how that whole process goes.
I try to explain it to people, but it's hard to let go of somebody you love, even if they do hurt you or not, Some things you don't have to accept them, but things that you can't change, you have to accept them. But if you got control of the situation, get out while you got a chance. Some people ain't lucky like me. Right. There's some people out there that'll kill a pregnant person. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
They don't, just get out.
Which is what she finally did.
After I had my baby, my whole demeanor changed. I just said to myself, I'm not going to put my child in a dangerous situation. I was just thinking, the only way that I'm going to be independent and not have to depend on anybody is if I go to a shelter, let them help me. That way I can look for jobs, that I got to take care. Food for my baby, I'll be safe. Won't nobody know where I'm at.
And across the country, shelters like the one in Pittsburgh take in women like Shaquaya when there's nowhere else to go. But these shelters are dependent on government and donor funding, and cuts to social service programs have hit the Pittsburgh shelter hard over the last few years.
We won't be able to continue to offer programs and help women and young women if the politicians don't help us. So we have to pay attention at local government and all the way up to our president.
So if you lost your funding and the shelter, heaven forbid, had to close, where would these women go? Where would they have as a safe place?
That is such a scary thought because we have 2,000 to 4,000 women killed annually in the United States at the hands of an abuser. So I don't even want to think about if there was not a shelter. And I mean that from my heart, not because this is my job.
If you think politics can't make a difference, that you can't make a difference, think of Shaquaya. I'm going to be thinking of her when I give my vote to candidates who make it a priority to support funding for domestic violence prevention programs. For Shaquaya, life as a young single mother working 2 jobs isn't easy, but she says getting help was the first step toward getting back on her feet.
I'm still struggling, but I'm happy. I'm alive. I'm able to wake up and see my son smile.
And it makes you smile.
It makes me happy.
I'm voting for the first time this year, and after my trip home, I understand more than ever just how much the government touches the most intimate aspects of my personal life. So you better believe I'm gonna make that vote count.